research that we've done with Generation Z has highlighted quite a different attitude to food compared to previous generations. So for instance, the most surprising thing is they talk about surprise not being important. Now, as a Generation Xer that looks forward to eating in restaurants and deciding on the night what I feel like eating, that feels a little bit confusing and almost a bit shocking. So for those in the food industry, it feels important that we dig a bit deeper as to what's really going on with Gen Z and why they're behaving differently and what are the implications for us moving forwards. Food is quite an interesting area for most generations, and what we've noticed is that previous generations, we call them boomers, my own generation, Gen X, and the Gen Ys, the millennials as people know them, and we all have quite an emotional response to food. So boomers, it's very much about social connectivity. For Gen Xers, it can be seen as a reward after a long day's work, or comfort eating, or even distraction if you're a bit bored during work. For Gen Y, we're seeing it's much more about self-expression. You're seeing a lot more mashups, combining things in strange ways and very much on Instagram, and it's very much about their identity. When it comes to Gen Z, it's really interesting. We're starting to see a bit more of a functional response to the way they approach food and drink. And so from that perspective, it's like, well, actually it feels quite different to previous. So what are the implications and how are we going to engage with them? The oldest of Gen Z are around about 17, 18, so they're really just starting to come into the marketplace in terms of their purchasing power. So probably now is the time to start to look at that and to understand how to engage with them more. In order to do that, we have to understand, well, why is the notion of surprise, for instance, such a scary concept for them? And why are they looking for a much more functional relationship with food? And the core thing there is that as an archetypal artist generation, a core motivation for them is protection. We see that in their online behaviour. So they are much more protective of who they allow in and who they allow to engage with them online, whereas Gen Y, as we know, are very much open and no boundaries. But in food in particular, they are adopting some interesting strategies in terms of how they protect. The first one is that they are big planners. So when we do our research, you know, from 17-year-olds down to 8-year-olds, you hear them talking about there is a time and a place for certain foods, and they look forward to that. So Wednesday is a certain meal, isn't it, Mum? Or Saturday is their day for friends, Sunday is the day for family, and they're very much in control of that. And that's quite different, you know, there doesn't seem to be as much spontaneity, potentially, around this generation. Secondly, they are very much more functionally aware, and they're using functional information to screen. So, for instance, they talk a lot about the sourcing of ingredients, not because of the romance or the provenance, but more as a way to actually make sure that they are consuming things that haven't travelled too far, that make sense for the planet. So it's quite a functional, as I said, and quite a rational response. Equally, interestingly, they're using hygiene ratings of restaurants to determine whether that restaurant is good or not. So the star ratings are coming up quite a lot when we were talking spontaneously, when we were talking to them in our research.